The committee will come to order. Welcome back, Secretary Wormuth. We appreciate your leadership of our nation's Army, and we look forward to discussing with you the Army's budget priorities for fiscal year 2025. And welcome, General George. To your first hearing before this subcommittee, I'm interested to hear your perspectives, and we look forward to hearing from you. The fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of the Army is $180.3 billion, excluding funds for MILCON, which is the same level as the enacted number for fiscal year 2024. Fiscal 24, once again, and unfortunately, unsurprisingly, began under a continuing resolution, which ended up lasting for a full 6 months. Our entire military is affected by CRs, but coupled with a months-long delay in enacting the National Security Supplemental, the Army was doubly affected because you were unable to replace weapons systems you donated to Ukraine with modern capabilities. I'm glad that Congress finally got its act together and passed the National Security Supplemental, but just like the regular appropriations bill, it was needlessly delayed by many months. Worldwide challenges and threats are constantly evolving, and as we discussed last year, the Army's response to the increasingly complex battlefield of the future is to transform into the Army of 2030. This transformation includes investments in people, the reorganization of forces, the development of new equipment, and the adoption of new concepts to defeat adversaries. We can best help the Army on its path to modernization through the timely enactment of a defense appropriations bill for fiscal year 2025. On-time appropriations provide the resource predictability, on-time appropriations provide the resource predictability that enable the Army to execute training and operational plans effectively for the entire fiscal year. I look forward to working with Senator Murray and Collins, and of course, the real chairman, Senator Tester, to position us for success to getting a budget passed on time. Once again, I want to thank each of you for your service to our country. Before you make your opening statements, I'll turn it over to the Vice Chair, Senator Collins, for her remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairman Schatz, and welcome to your new role on this subcommittee. Secretary Wormuth, it's great to see you again. General George, as this is your first time testifying before our subcommittee, I want to welcome you. Thank you both for your service and your leadership. One of my chief concerns for the Army this year remains the same as it was last year, and that is recruiting. Madam Secretary, I commend you and the Chief for your steadfast refusal to compromise on recruiting standards, and I understand from your written testimony that the results of the Future Soldier Prep course continue to be promising. Nevertheless, the Army either missed its recruiting objectives or lowered them in 3 of the last 5 years. The proposed active duty end strength represents the smallest active duty Army since the start of the volunteer force in 1973. It is substantially less than the Army's goal of 470,000 soldiers by the year 2029. I look forward to hearing how the Army is updating its recruiting approach and what resources are included in your budget request to recruit enough qualified men and women. While the national security strategy's primary focus is competition with China, Army soldiers, along with our sailors and Marines, are in harm's way today in the Middle East. It is also the Army, more than any other service, that is providing the lion's share of equipment and training to help Ukraine's own army defeat and defend against Russia's brutal invasion. I would ask our witnesses to clearly articulate how the Army's proposed modernization efforts and force structure changes will improve the Army's posture to address these growing threats. In particular, I'm interested in hearing more about how you plan to integrate robotic and unmanned systems into your future formations using platforms like the Robotic Combat Vehicle. A very innovative company in Maine, I'm pleased to say, How, is contributing to this critical technology. General George, counter-drone technology is also at the top of your unfunded priorities list. I hope you will share with us in greater detail your prioritization of those capabilities, since I share your view on their importance. The recently passed supplemental bill included more than $380 million for Army counter-drone systems, none of which I would know was included in the original supplemental request. So I'm glad that working with Chairman Murray and Chairman Tester, that we have been able to address that critical need. It's important as we deal with the attacks against Israel and against our forces that are in harm's way from the threats posed by Iran and its proxies. Let me give you one illustration of why these investments are so important. The son of one of the most experienced workers at an armament plant in Saco, Maine, was deployed with the Army in the Middle East after October 7th. His Army unit was protected from these inbound drones by the very weapon systems built in Saco. So we must never forget that there are real lives at stake, and that is why it's so critical that we continue to modernize and invest in the defense industrial base, since we've seen firsthand that warfare has changed dramatically. Finally, I would ask both of our witnesses to provide an update on how this budget request builds upon the progress from the fiscal year 24 supplemental to expand munition production and strengthen our industrial base. We've made a lot of good progress, but there's still much work to be done. I look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Collins. Secretary Wormuth, please proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Senator Schatz, Vice Chair Collins, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for your continued support of our soldiers, Army civilians, and their families. General George and I appear before you today at a moment of profound transformation for the United States Army. We're transforming our capabilities, our force structure, and our recruiting enterprise to ensure the Army is ready and able to defeat evolving threats, keep pace with technology, and attract the very best talent. As we pursue this transformation, we're also taking care of our people, ensuring that our soldiers and families have the quality of life that they deserve to sustain our readiness now and in the future. This is my fourth year in front of this committee, and like last year, the Army's 25 budget continues to support the most ambitious modernization effort the Army has undertaken in more than 40 years. We're making significant progress, I'm pleased to report, in transforming our capabilities by staying consistent in our goals and meeting key milestones for development and fielding. The Next Generation Squad Weapon, Integrated Battle Command System, Mid-Range Capability, and Precision Strike Missile are just some examples of the critical new systems that we've recently delivered. As we bring these new systems into our inventory, we're also transforming our force structure to meet the priorities of the National Defense Strategy. We're building out new formations, such as our 5 multi-domain task forces, that are equipped with the capabilities we need to conduct large-scale combat operations against technologically advanced military powers. And we're shrinking excess force structure so that the units we have are manned and ready. While these force structure decisions bring down authorized troop levels by about 24,000 spaces, our goal is to increase our authorized end strength to 470,000 by the fiscal year 2029. To meet that goal, General George and I and the whole Army team are working around the clock to overcome our recruiting challenges, and we're making solid progress. Building on successful initiatives like the Future Soldier Prep Course, we're fundamentally transforming our recruiting enterprise to better compete in the 21st century job market. Most significantly, we are redesigning our recruiting workforce by creating new permanent specialized recruiters for both enlisted soldiers and warrant officers. And actually, the assessment and selection of the first class of warrant officers focused on recruiting is finished, and they will be going out into the field later this summer. But while we transform, we can't lose sight of taking care of our soldiers and families. A key part of this responsibility is providing safe, high-quality housing and barracks. So over the next 5 years, the Army will invest on average $2.1 billion every year in the construction, sustainment, restoration, and modernization of barracks for unaccompanied soldiers. This investment will fund barracks sustainment at 100% for the first time in years. And we are leveraging the expertise of the Army Corps of Engineers to stabilize project costs, and we're hiring civilian barracks managers so that our soldiers can focus on warfighting responsibilities. Physically and emotionally healthy soldiers are more resilient, higher performing, and less likely to engage in harmful behaviors. To build resilient soldiers, we're expanding our holistic health and fitness program to 71 active component brigades. We're investing in financial counseling services to ensure that our soldiers know how to manage their money. And we're encouraging programs in our divisions that focus on soldier well-being. Our goal has been and remains building cohesive teams that can fight and win. Throughout this transformation, which is required given the very dangerous world in which we live, we're continuing to provide combatant commands with trained and ready formations. This year's budget seeks $1.5 billion for activities tied to the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, and we've asked for $460 million for Operation Pacific Pathways, our series of exercises focused on strengthening deterrence and interoperability with partners in the Indo-Pacific. In Europe, our troops are demonstrating our commitment to deterring Russian aggression. As you said, Vice Chairman Collins, the Army is leading the effort to support Ukraine, from training over 17,000 Ukrainian troops to providing hundreds of vehicles, weapon systems, and millions of munitions. And in the Middle East, our soldiers are mission-focused and have been hard at work building the floating pier to deliver more humanitarian aid in Gaza. The Chief and I appreciate the recently passed supplemental appropriations bill that will maintain our critical support to Ukraine, support partners in Asia and the Middle East, and invest in our own readiness. And we strongly urge going forward the passing of on-time annual appropriation bills that will maintain our readiness in this volatile time. With your support, we'll continue to take care of our people and sustain the Army's transformation that will keep us the best Army in the world. I'm proud of all that our soldiers and Army civilians are doing and look forward to your questions this morning.
Thank you very much, Secretary Wormuth. General George, please proceed.
Thank you. Senator Schatz, Vice Chair Collins, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today about our Army. The world is more volatile today than I've seen it in my 36-year career, and there is clearer cooperation between adversaries than we've seen in a while. A spark in any region could have global impacts. Meanwhile, the character of war is changing rapidly, which we see from what is happening on the battlefields in Ukraine and the Middle East. Our Army is as important to the joint force as it has ever been. We must deter war everywhere and be ready to respond anywhere. So we are focused on providing the best Army with the budget we are given. Our soldiers deserve it, our joint teammates deserve it, and our nation deserves it. And that means making some tough decisions and finding ways to get better every day. As the Secretary already highlighted, our planned investments reflected in our FY25 budget will help our Army win the future fight and ensure that our soldiers and their families remain ready and resilient. Across the Army, we are learning from global events and continuously transforming how we operate, how we train, and how we equip. And I'd like to highlight a handful of things. We're learning that designs for things like unmanned systems must be modular, adaptable, and software-defined. We are working to get relevant technology into the hands of soldiers immediately. We are learning that counter-unmanned systems must evolve as the threat does to protect our formations and critical infrastructure. We're also moving out on that while being mindful of the cost curve. We need cheaper solutions. We are learning that in some cases the right tech already exists to support transformation. For instance, the tech exists to make our command and control nodes more mobile, lower signature, and more effective. We are fixing our network. And we are building our magazine depth and modernizing our organic industrial base because we know that wars never end as quickly as we hope. They take a lot of ammo. We are also transforming how we recruit, ensuring that we have the right talent and the right tech, and that we are getting the word out about how our Army is a great place to serve because of our mission and our people. Finally, we are also looking at where we need to reimagine our processes and where we can afford to stop doing things that don't support our warfighting mission or building cohesive teams. I'm proud of what our soldiers are doing around the world to help defend our country. Thank you all for your support, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General George. Secretary Wormuth, last year you visited Schofield Barracks on Oahu, and after touring where soldiers live, you said to the press, and I'll quote, "I wasn't happy with what I saw, frankly. Those are the kinds of things that I want us to get after." Tell me what you saw and tell me what you're doing about it.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. I've seen a lot of barracks over the last 3+ years, so I'm not sure if I'll remember exactly what I saw at Schofield, but what I've seen and what I probably saw there was struggles with, water on the floor, humidity. I remember meeting one soldier in his barracks room, and it looked like he had just stepped out of the shower in his bathroom, but in fact, the water was, seeping through the floor because of issues with the foundation. And as you know well, some of the barracks at Schofield are pretty old. And so what we're doing is investing $2.1 billion a year in barracks, whether it's construction for new barracks, whether it's renovating barracks we already have, or sustaining barracks at 100%, which is something we have not done in a long time. And I think all of that together will help us significantly decrease the amount in our inventory of barracks that are kind of at an unacceptable condition. I will be honest with you, we have a huge inventory of barracks, and we're going to, even with all of that money that we're investing, we really need to invest more in barracks. But everything, we've got to figure out where that incremental dollar goes, but I think this will do a lot.
So you $2 billion a year at 100%, right? So let me try to understand this. This is FSRM money?
Yes.
Okay, not MILCON.
Well, the $2.1 billion is the total. There is MILCON, there is FSRM. That's a total.
I got it. Okay.
But within that, we are sustaining at 100%, as opposed to 85%, which is what we've typically done.
And how does that work on your? I'm sure you have a sort of wedge analysis to get to where you want to go. How many years of that level of investment would get us to something that you would consider acceptable?
I think it's going to take us several years, Senator, because, as you know, property just depreciates continuously over time. So the 100% sustainment will help slow that, steady decrease in quality. But we are going to have to make these kinds of investments for multiple years.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you get us some fidelity on, you have an inflation number that you now have to work with, and then you have the normal depreciation. And then your answer is several years, but I'd like to know if it's 4.5 or 6.5 or 2.5, because I think the committee needs to know, in case there is a desire to spend more on this kind of thing, what would get us to a better baseline.
We can get that for you.
Thank you very much. General George, I have been a fan of Pacific Pathways for a very, very long time. I want to give you a couple of examples of how cost-effective it is. Of course, you know this, but this is really for staff. $18 million in 2023, the Army built partner capacity in the Philippines through Exercise Balakatan. In 2019, the Army spent $823,000 in Palau, conducting joint homeland defense drills, community health outreach, and repairing infrastructure. Can you just, tell the public, tell the committee, about the cost effectiveness of Pacific Pathways? I've never seen, especially in this committee, something so inexpensive and high impact. Your mic's not on.
Pathways is incredibly effective for us out in the Pacific. I mean, right now, what USERPAC is doing in the Philippines is they basically are taking an exportable training package that's out there and helping to train those formations. We have the same thing in reverse when we have all of our partners and allies that are coming to Hawaii to train, which is very effective for our relationships that are out there in the Pacific. But all of those exercises, I would say, are building our interoperability. They're building trust with our partners and allies that are out there, and they're building real capability. We're also using them, just to your cost effectiveness, to help us transform. I mean, some of the things that we're doing out there right now with 25th ID that's been out there using unmanned systems to deliver ammunition, so using on the logistics side. So we could go on a long time about what the impact we think that that's having out there.
Two thoughts. First of all, the soldiers also love it. They love it. And that's not a trivial aspect of this program. The other thing is, if you can get us some data on how much more you could do with more resources, that would be very helpful. Vice Chair Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wormuth, we discussed just recently in my office the horrific mass shooting that occurred last October 25th in the state of Maine, the worst mass shooting in our state's history, in which 18 individuals died and another 13 were injured. The killer, Robert Card, was a sergeant first class in the U.S. Army Reserve. The governor of Maine has established an independent commission that has already issued an interim report, and that report includes several very troubling findings about missed opportunities to prevent this tragedy. So I want to ensure that we're taking every action necessary to try to lessen or prevent the chances of such a tragedy ever happening again. Secretary Austin has committed to working with me in drafting legislation that would require our military services to report to the appropriate authorities when a service member poses a threat to him or herself or to others while protecting the Second Amendment rights of our service members. But to draft the most effective legislation, I very much need the results of the review that the Army Reserve has undertaken, as well as the investigation that I requested from the Inspector General. Originally, the Army Reserve's administrative review was supposed to be completed by mid-January, and we expected to have the IG's report by the end of February. Could you please update me on when we can expect those two critical reports?
Certainly. And Senator, first of all, I would say, my heart goes out to all of the families in Maine that lost people and that were affected by the terrible shooting. It was truly tragic. You will be able to expect, I think, the Army Reserve investigation in a couple more weeks. It has been, as we talked about, very comprehensive. There are over, I think, 3,000 pages of interviews with witnesses and documents that they've collected, which is partly why it's taken so long, but it should be done in a couple more weeks. And then I think the separate review being done by our Army Inspector General will follow shortly after that.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you on the legislation and would love to have your commitment for that as well.
We look forward to working with you on your legislation.
Thank you. General George, there are those who are against assistance to Ukraine in particular that contend that our defense industrial base cannot build enough air defense Patriots, for example, or artillery rounds to support Ukraine and Israel while also meeting the Army's own requirements for these systems, even after the substantial investment from the supplemental. And I'm a very strong supporter of assisting both Ukraine and Israel. The implication of this line of argument is that we should end our security assistance to Ukraine because we can't take care of our own Army's needs as well. So let me ask you directly, can the Army and our allies effectively manage the risk to the Army's munitions stockpiles, particularly for air defense and artillery, while also providing assistance to Ukraine and Israel?
Senator, I think we can. And I do want to say thanks on the supplemental. I think obviously the most important thing for us is on-time funding so we can get things, and we struggled a little bit with that over this last year. And what we need to do is what we're on the path to do is also continuing to invest in our organic industrial base. And we can get examples for like 155, where we're producing a little over 30,000 rounds a month, and by the beginning of 26, we'll be producing over 100,000 rounds a month. So that's what we need to do. We need to continue to invest in that, in addition to what we're supplying for our, to those efforts.
Thank you.
Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member, Vice Chairman. Secretary, General George, welcome. Welcome to your debut hearing in the appropriations process. Last October, the Undersecretary announced a digital engineering strategy to optimize sustainment across the services. I understand the Army just this morning signed a policy to help accelerate the adoption of digital engineering. My view is that these tools are incredibly important for designing and building new platforms and sustaining existing systems. Secretary, can you tell the committee a little bit more about the forthcoming policy and how the Army's previous digital engineering work informs the adoption of this capability?
Thank you, Senator Moran. It's good to see you, and we are excited about our new digital engineering policy. Basically, what we're trying to do is make it easier for the Army to adopt digital engineering approaches more broadly at scale across the Army. This is the kind of work that allows us to do modeling and simulation and explore engineering challenges using computer simulations, which is more efficient and less costly. So, for example, our program to replace the Bradley fighting vehicle, the XM30 program, is incorporating digital engineering in its development work. And the policy has a number of different components, but its broad goal is to help us use that important approach more broadly so that we can be more effective in our modernization programs.
Thank you for that answer. General George, I would guess that the Senator from Connecticut, Senator Murphy, will ask you about the future long-range assault aircraft and its safety. I want to inform you that I support the decision to award Bell Textron the contract for FLRAA. This is an aircraft that maneuvers like a helicopter in vertical flight, flies twice as far and twice as fast as current helicopters. All of this needs to be done with a safe piece of equipment. The aircraft competitively selected by the Army was the only one that fully met those requirements, and that was validated by the GAO. Would you highlight for the committee the importance of speed and maneuverability this aircraft provides, as well as how the Army plans to leverage its open system architecture?
Yes, Senator. I mean, it can't come fast enough for me. So I think this is going to be a game-changing, for this aircraft, just for what you talked about, the range it's going to have, the speed it's going to have, and then with open architecture, what we can do with manned, unmanned teaming, launch defects, all the other things that are going to come with this. So I think it's going to increase our capabilities.
Thank you. Secretary, TAA highlighted several capabilities requiring significant investments at a time in which the Army budget, probably for this fiscal year, represents about FY22 levels. I hear that there's a potential of establishment of new structures or a new structure, like a drone branch or a permanent ABCT in Poland. Would the simultaneous establishment of additional units not planned for in previous RStructs be disruptive to the Army's current plans to modernize?
Thank you, Senator. I think it would be challenging to generate, for example, a whole new armored brigade combat team, given the recruiting challenges that we're working through. And like I said, I want to emphasize that we are, I think, going to make our recruiting goal this year. But we have not built into our current TAA plans an intention to build a new armored brigade combat team. Instead, we are looking at things like the counter UAS battery that would eventually come to Fort Riley, to the maneuver SHORAD battalions and the multi-domain task forces. So at this time, we are not looking at building a new armored brigade combat team, and I think we want to focus on the integrated air and missile defense formations that are going to be so important for large-scale conflict against an advanced competitor.
You have established your priorities, and you believe in those priorities. Is that what you're telling me?
I do, and I mean, we review our force structure every year, so we certainly want to adjust to conditions and adjust, as the strategy may require us. But right now, I think we believe that we're what we've built in terms of new formations are what's right for the Army right now.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a comment just on the one
Please,
topic
General.
that didn't come up? I know we're a little over, but on the we appreciate the interest, for example, on drones, and you mentioned drone branch. For us, this is a capability that's going to be, I think, resident in every formation at every echelon. So we see this as integrated into our formation, not some separate piece. And I think we need that kind of flexibility. We're actually doing that right now with our formations. We've selected 3 units to kind of work this out and start to transform in contact in doing this, but I don't think it would be helpful to have a separate drone branch.
Understood. Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wormuth, as you know, the tactical wheeled vehicle industrial base is an important part of the Wisconsin economy, as well as a vital contributor to the Army's warfighting requirements. I remain troubled by the Army's lack of careful management of the industrial base as I see it. The Army has now awarded the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle contract to an organization with no experience making JLTVs. That company must now stand up a brand new production line, risking a gap in fielding this critical platform. So, Secretary Wormuth, what is the status of this new JLTV line and supply chain? And will the new vendor meet the required schedule for production and fielding? Has the Army identified any technical, schedule, or financial risks? And under what circumstances will the Army negotiate a bridge contract with the incumbent manufacturer, Oshkosh Defense, to avoid any gaps in production? And I can repeat those because I gave you quite a few.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. At this time, we are not anticipating any problems in the shift from Oshkosh to AM General. As you rightly pointed out, AM General has not made JLTV previously, but one of the things that I think will provide a bridge, if you will, and allow AM General to be fully prepared is the fact that we are going to keep the production line open with Oshkosh using replenishment funds. So that, I think, will allow us to make a smooth transition. We are also, in addition to heavy tactical vehicles, medium tactical vehicles are very important to us. And so we have extended the period of performance for the contract with Oshkosh on those vehicles.
But can you update us on the status of the new line and the supply chain, and whether you believe the new vendor will meet the required schedule for production and fielding?
Senator, I'm confident the new vendor will meet the schedule, but I am happy to have Mr. Bush, our Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, and his team come and brief you in detail on what we're seeing right now with that company.
Okay. The Army routinely submits a budget with a request for tactical wheeled vehicles at numbers substantially below industry's minimum sustaining rate, expecting this committee to make up the difference. For many years, I have pressed the Army to adequately fund these platforms, and we are here today looking at another inadequate budget request. Ahead of this year's budget, I sent you a letter asking that the fiscal year 2025 budget reflect more realistic procurement numbers. And again this year, the budget request is insufficient. Last week, I asked Secretary Austin to engage the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for industrial-based policy in analyzing the Army's management of these programs. Secretary Wormuth, will you work with the Assistant Secretary on a plan for future Army budget requests that better sustain the industrial base? And can I expect to receive the forthcoming tactical vehicle strategy that is due this coming summer?
We would be happy to work with the Assistant Secretary for Industrial Programs to get you that information, Senator. We work closely with that part of the Office of Secretary of Defense on a regular basis, and we'll work with them to get you the report. I would say, you know, one of the challenges that General George and I have with the flat Army budget is trying to balance, if you will, investment in enduring systems like our vehicles and pursuing the ambitious modernization program that we have. It's always a challenge to determine how to allocate that incremental dollar. And I think to continue to support our modernization program, you see us stretching out, if you will, some of the investments in the ground vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boozman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate your leadership and I know unwavering commitment not only to our soldiers, but also, and as importantly, their families. I understand the Coyote unmanned aircraft system was developed as a joint urgent operational need, which allowed for rapid acquisition. This resulted in some steps of the standard process being abbreviated. For example, the total Army munitions requirement for the Coyote missile is still being determined. Without this, it is hard for the Army or industry to forecast accordingly and know what to expect in future budget and contracts. Secretary Wormuth, what is the Army doing to finalize this documentation so that the Army and industry can use it as the basis for Coyote's long-term planning and investment?
Thank you, Senator. We have been relooking our total minimum requirements for munitions and for things like the Coyote interceptor. And I think there's a general recognition that given what we're seeing in Ukraine, that we need to increase our stockpiles of munitions and counter-UAS capabilities. So we are working on that right now. I think General George and I both believe that we need to invest more in counter-UAS capabilities, which is why you see some of that on his unfunded priority list. But given that the chief sets requirements, why don't I let him speak to that in particular?
Thank you.
Yeah, the Coyote is a perfect example of where we need to head. It's been, you know, we've sent users, developers, testers forward. We've made it, as the battlefield has changed, we've made, you know, adjustments. We were looking to actually acquire more Coyotes. Some of the problem was we couldn't increase production because of the continuing resolution and some of those changes. This is one area, Senator, where I think flexible funding, and I know sometimes that can be a bad word, but within counter-UAS, UAS, and EW portfolios would really help us. The battlefield is changing very, very rapidly, you know, and I'm talking days and weeks. Sometimes you're lucky to get, you know, things changing in a month. But as it changes, we need to be able to, you know, go back to, you know, we have the best industry in the world, to go back and say, hey, we need to change this, we need to up the quantity. Coyote was one of those examples. And that would also help us, you know, if there is continuing resolutions, that if we had that built in, that we could make those adjustments. And that's what we were faced with last fall, and it was tough to make those adjustments in stride.
Very good. The Defense Industrial Base in Camden, Arkansas remains at the forefront of critical munitions production for our national defense. We anticipate multi-year procurement authority will improve production rates in the long term and send a much-needed demand signal to our industry partners. Your joint statement also highlights the need for further investments in order to ensure that the nation can scale the production of critical munitions and systems to meet current and future operations. Secretary Wormuth, General George, can you speak to what these investments should entail? And again, does the budget that's being proposed, does it meet the Army's demand for munitions?
Thank you, Senator. This budget has over $3 billion in it for munitions because, again, I think there's a recognition that we have to build up our stockpiles. So that includes money for GMLRS, PAC-3, which we've got the multi-year authority for, Javelins, 155 millimeter, you name it. And in addition to the $3 billion for the munitions themselves, the budget also includes $1 billion for investing in the Army's own organic industrial base, so that the various depots, arsenals, and ammo plants can be more capable of producing, faster and in larger capacities. So I think we're really trying to get after it in this budget in that area.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here and for your service. It sounds like Senator Moran predicted my opening line of questioning here. Listen, I think we've made a really bad bet on doubling down on tilt rotor technology that has proved to be deadly and has proved to be wildly expensive. From March 2022 to November 2023, we had 20 service members die in 4 separate fatal Osprey crashes. This was after the Department of Defense said in February of 2023 that they had fixed the problem, the hard clutch engagement problem, that was thought to be behind earlier crashes. They were 99% certain that the problem had been fixed. And then there were 4 crashes where 20 more service members died. This is in addition to the program being wildly expensive. Costs per flying hour have spiked by 22% just between 2019 and 2020. And so the decision to double down on the tilt rotor program with a tilt rotor selection as part of the Future Vertical Lift program sounds disastrous and wildly costly for this committee. The reports are that the tilt rotor bid was twice that of the competing bid. And then you have all of this evidence that you haven't fixed the safety problems. So, Secretary Wormuth, can you explain, A, how the Army can justify moving forward with a new tilt rotor aircraft when we can't even figure out how to address the safety issues with the existing Osprey, and how we are going to account for a tilt rotor program that is known for its tendency for cost escalation? How can you guarantee that this isn't going to become just a giant cost suck on this committee as the costs escalate in the new tilt rotor program as they have in the Osprey program?
Thank you, Senator. A couple of things on that. So on safety, certainly we're concerned always anytime we see a helicopter crash or an airplane crash, whether it's the Osprey or, we've had some crashes of our Apaches. But one of the things I think that the FLRAA program will benefit from is over 20 years of safety experience with the Osprey and lessons from the Osprey. So we will be factoring all of that and learning from all of that. And again, no helicopter is perfect. They are inherently, there can be challenges, but I think we will benefit greatly from the long track record and be able to learn lessons in terms of safety from Osprey. More broadly, to your point about costs, again, we looked at not just costs when we considered the bids that came in, but also performance. And so I think we have to weigh that. And as you know, ultimately, the GAO found that our decision to go with Bell Textron was sound. So we will continue to look very closely at cost, and we'll monitor cost growth, but we also need to be looking at performance, and we felt that the Bell Textron proposal would give us the performance that we need.
A couple of years ago, the Army's #1 modernization priority was the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft program. The Army reversed itself, canceled that program, which is going to put us in a position to have to rely on the Black Hawk in the short term to do a lot more work. And yet, this budget request includes only $25 million in Army research and development funding for Black Hawk modernization, which just doesn't sound right, given the fact that now that you aren't building a new future attack reconnaissance aircraft, you are going to need to very quickly scale up and modernize the Black Hawk. So how do we make sure that we invest in the Black Hawk program in part as a means to balance out what we've lost with the cancellation of the FARA program?
Thank you, Senator. One thing the Army is doing as part of our rebalance of the aviation portfolio is to pursue the reconnaissance requirements in a different way, really relying on much more of space-based sensing, the combination of space-based sensing, existing platforms, and things like future tactical unmanned aerial systems and what we were previously calling air-launched effects, but really we're now just calling launched effects. So inherent in our decisions in the rebalancing is the fact that we believe we can meet that requirement in a different way. As you point out, we do need to continue to invest in Black Hawk. And I think there are things that we could do if Congress decided, for example, to give us more money for research and development in '25 for Black Hawk. We could work on the fly-by-wire capabilities. We could work on doing more with the improved turbine engine, which is going to be critical not just for Black Hawk, but also for Apache. So there are projects I think we could pursue, but I would leave it there.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and welcome. Good to see you, Madam Secretary. General, thank you for being here and your leadership. We talk a lot about the various aircraft, the equipment, but I think we know that as good as that may be, if we fail to invest adequately in our soldiers, that's where we fail. That's where we have the vulnerabilities. So we've had these conversations before about how we really take a whole of person approach in addressing the physical, the mental, the emotional, even the spiritual needs of our soldiers. We've had the discussion about conditions in Alaska and some of the challenges that present themselves that often contribute to mental health struggles. One of the things that we have found that is amazing in its effort or its ability to uplift morale is this program that we authorized in the FY23 NDAA, and this is the Fly Back Home. When particularly a junior service member who is maybe in Alaska and calls New York or Maine home, the cost of an airplane ticket is prohibitively expensive. And so when we put this in place, what we saw was not only good, strong usage of it, but excitement about what it did. It basically gave people something to look forward to, and in terms of a mental health boost, it was really quite considerable. So, General George, I would ask if you would speak to the value of such a program for our soldiers, and Secretary, if you can then comment as to whether the Army intends to restart the flyback program. General.
Thanks, Senator, and I agree with you. Your comment up front that our edge is our soldiers and making sure that we're investing in them. We're really proud. I think a lot of things that we have done, and we have seen General Eifler in the 11th Airborne Division up there, has informed things across the Army. So they're doing great. And first and foremost is they're doing great training up there. And, you know, we're continuing to invest in that because I think that that's critically important. And I know you've had an opportunity to see that. What we like to say is that every location is unique, and we need to be able to do unique things like the Fly Back Home program. That's very unique, you know, given where they're at. and is helpful for us. And I think that we have to look at every installation like that a little bit different. I will tell you that Alaska is near the top. You know, we offer stations of choice. There's a lot of people that want to go up and serve in Alaska. That has helped, you know, with us for our recruiting. And I think it's they want to come up to Alaska and experience that. But it's also because they do a really good job of taking care of their soldiers and their families. And I think it starts there.
We're trying, we're making some headway, but again, it's these little things. Secretary, can you comment on whether or not there's any intention to restart the program?
Certainly, Senator Murkowski. I think what I'd like to do is, you know, as you know, we have the Fly Home program. We also have the remote conditions and austere incentive pay for Wainwright and J-Bear, and have spent, I think, over $25 million on that. And then our vice chief right now is really stepping back and reviewing our MTO for the entire 11th Airborne Division to see if we're investing it the way that we need. What I'd like to do is commit to you to look at whether, to look at the cost benefits of restarting the Fly Home program. We are under a flat top line, so every dollar we're constantly in a Peter and Paul situation. But I know it was a popular program, and I would commit to you that we will look at that, but I'd like to look at it in the context of some of the other programs that we're doing.
Well, and since you raised the MTO, it really does speak to the gaps that we're seeing there with the 11th, including the lack of the MTO, the equipment to define what equipment is appropriate for the Arctic, the lack of the division artillery, the lack of sustainment brigade, the lack of an aviation headquarters. So I'm glad to know that you are reviewing that. I'm hopeful that we're going to see some progress on this soon, that this is not something that we're going to be studying for a long while. I think we recognize what has been put in place with the 11th, the focus on the Arctic strategy and the need to emphasize the dominance there. But we have to have it all lined up. We just can't have it in name only or in title only. I think you both recognize that. So I don't know if you can inform me as to timing on what we might expect for progress on this. General, do you know?
Yeah, we're getting together and having these discussions. I just would tell you, Senator, the things that I think we need to grow first and foremost with structure is counter-UAS capabilities, counter-UAS batteries. I think we need to grow additional integrated air and missile defense, and we need to grow some long-range fires. So we're obviously looking at it. This, total Army analysis is something that we're, need to do. We did upgun the aviation, oversight up there and added some slots to do that, to make sure that we're, kind of have the right oversight up there with that. But I'm just putting it in context that if we're going to grow capabilities, it would be my recommendation that we would grow some of these other things first. I'm not saying that those aren't all, that aren't important, but we would need to grow those other capabilities first.
We'll look forward to working with you and getting the updates on this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you for being here today. It's great to be here today to talk about what resources the Army needs in the coming year and to make sure we're supporting the men and women in uniform who keep all of us safe. I want to be sure that we deliver the investments your service needs, and it's critical we also provide adequate funding for agencies across government, because as we talked about with Secretary Austin, the Department of Defense does not operate in a vacuum. If we fail to properly fund state and other departments, then our nation is less secure and will end up having to spend more money on the Pentagon. Not to mention, we leave families more vulnerable to threats like wildfires and pandemics and fentanyl and other crises. So with that in mind, I'm glad to have you here today, and I just want to discuss a few things, and one of them is childcare. One of the main challenges I hear from Joint Base Lewis McChord in my home state of Washington is that maintaining adequate staff for its child development centers is a problem. If you don't have staff, they can't provide child care, and without safe quality child care, it's really difficult for our service members to accomplish their mission requirements. Women service members in particular report that lack of childcare jeopardizes their career opportunities. In FY24, Senator Tester and I secured $167 million to fully fund the Department of Defense's child care initiatives, and I'm glad you were able to reopen a CDC at JBLM in January. However, staffing constraints are still preventing it from operating at full capacity. So, Secretary Wormuth, have the benefits DoD offers for child care workers shown to be an effective tool for recruitment and retention?
I think the incentives are helping us, absolutely, Chair Murray. You know, we offer a recruiting bonus, and we also have retention incentives. We have been offering a 50% discount on a worker's first child, you know, attending the CDC as well. We've also had a pilot opening up commissary benefits to our CDC workers. Those are helping us, but
is there something else we should be doing?
I think one of the things that is a big challenge for us is the time it takes to hire civilian workers. So figuring out, frankly, to be blunt, how we can make USA jobs more effective, to shorten the time it takes to hire civilian workers, that would be...
How long does it take?
It takes, in some cases, more than 180 days.
So they take something else.
So they take another job, that's right. And at places like JBLM, we're at about 70% staffing. And that's something that's controlled by OPM. It's outside of the Army. But we are looking ourselves at what we can do inside the Army to speed up civilian hiring. But ultimately, USA Jobs is a big piece of it.
Thank you. General, did you want to add?
Just because I just was up at JBLM, Senator Murray, and obviously been stationed there. So I think every location is a little bit different. JBLM is one of the areas that we're short, probably more than other locations. In a lot of areas that are, you know, we're well above 90% in the hiring. So we're dealing with this in different areas, and I know that I've read something recently. There's more than 40,000 shortage nationwide, you know, for childcare. So I think we're competing. One of the things that we're looking at, again, every location is unique and different, is how do we also, in addition to what the Secretary mentioned as far as commissary, we've done, that's worked as a privilege up there, giving them money off if they have kids in. We're actually offering them access, because sometimes it's spouses, to housing a little quicker. Housing is another challenge that's up there. And then I think we also have to look at the pay that we're doing, and I don't think we need any help with that. But you know, what grade is it that we could maybe go up a little bit? But I did want to foot stomp on the USA Jobs and the challenge. Just with that kind of hiring, it's an old system, and I think that could be updated.
Okay, well, you mentioned housing, and that's the other thing I hear about all the time. We're still seeing issues with mold, with rodents, with the availability of suitable and affordable housing, especially at JBLM. I've heard as many as 650 service members and their families are spending anywhere from 3 to 12 months in a hotel or other accommodation while they wait for a home on base or become available. These service members and their families need to have a safe, reliable, affordable place to live, period. So talk to me, Secretary Wormuth, about what you're doing to ensure housing needs are met at both on and off base.
Thank you. We're doing a few things. In this year's budget, for example, we have investment for 138 new homes, 250 renovations of homes, and $400 million for sustainment of existing Army-owned family housing, in addition to all of the money, the $2.1 billion that we're putting into barracks for unaccompanied soldiers. We also continue to work extremely closely with our 5 privatized housing partners to make sure that they are providing quality housing, to make sure that they have enough maintenance workers, you know, to make sure that they are taking care of the privatized homes. So we absolutely still have challenges, Chair, but I think we are trying very hard to reduce the problems with mold and long waits for maintenance.
Do you have anything you wanted to add?
I just would add, Senator, up there, one of the things that we do that's unique to JBLM is we have an office there that does rental agreements to help. Because again, it's a specific problem up there, and you know what the housing market over the last several years has gone up there, where soldiers don't have to pay you know, to get several credit checks, it's one thing. They don't have to put in big deposits. So we're doing other things as well, and we're
With the
doing that.
community?
We're doing that with the community, which again, I think that's what we're going to have to do is tailor, you know, some of those solutions locally. Because the truth is that about 30% of our, you know, force lives on base, you know, in family housing. So we're going to have to work with the local communities really across the country to solve this.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you, and thank you both, not just for your service, but for being here with us today. It's good to see both of you again. My questions are, first of all, I wanted to ask about cyber. Obviously, we're facing more cyber threats at every level and in every aspect of our critical infrastructure. And from what I understand, the Guard is already playing a critical role in domestic response to cyber attacks, including through our Critical Infrastructure Battalion at the Army Interagency Training and Education Center in my state of West Virginia. This unit supports a number of DoD and DHS programs. Is there a more direct role for the National Guard to play in cyber, specifically using them as a liaison force between the federal government, the states, and the local and state critical infrastructure? Do you all have, what would your response to that be? Yeah.
Senator, I think what I would say is, you know, we try to leverage all of the cyber expertise across all three of our components, active, Guard, and reserve, and certainly there's a lot of great cyber expertise in the Guard. I think trying to have a one-size-fits-all program with the Guard is challenging because, frankly, the level of expertise varies from state to state, and also, frankly, so 85% of our critical infrastructure is in the private sector, and so there's a tremendous amount of diversity. But I can tell you that I know General Barrett, who's the Army Cyber Commander, works very closely with the Guard to try to make sure that we're making the best use of them, and that we're also retaining, frankly, that capability, which is very in demand right now.
Yeah. General George, do you have a response?
Yeah, I just would, and having deployed with some of these experts in the Guard, I think what makes them very unique when they come into your formations is a lot of them work this in their daily jobs,
Right.
and really keep up a skill level, which is really helpful for us. So we are constantly looking. We're in discussions right now with the Guard on what adjustments we need to make. I do think that that is part of our continuous transformation, looking at how we our cyber formations. Again, I think that's one of the things that's made the world much smaller with space and cyber. So we're constantly evaluating how we can get better in that space.
Good, good. Well, on Friday, we had a great announcement in Huntington, West Virginia, at Marshall University, in a Marshall University, West Virginia University collaboration. They're friends now, unless they're on the football field, is what the bottom line was there. But it was the DoD National Center for Excellence for Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure. They're trying to develop the workforce, but it's a really great collaborative effort between private sector, academia, the DoD, and the Guard and U.S. Cybercom. So I think we're moving in the great direction in West Virginia. Very excited about the potential for that project in our home state. My next question is on Army soldier-led innovation programs. Providing, obviously, weapons to Ukraine illuminated some of our shortfalls and some of where we're doing really well. And I've been a big supporter of soldier-led innovation through the Army DevCom's Pathfinder program and the Accelerating Force program. These programs help to transition our weapons and our tech by actually putting it in the hands of our military before it's actually as an experimentation type of thing. So you can get on-the-ground reactions from folks that are going to be using these weapons, what lessons can be learned. What is the Army's plan to increase funding for these types of soldier-driven innovation programs? And can we get new technology solutions into soldiers' hands for experimentation? Because I think it will bring great successes to us. So, General, I don't know if you want to start with that.
Sure. I'm wishing there was more time on the clock to talk about this one. So we're doing what we're calling transformation and contact, and I would love to have our team come up here and kind of lay that out, what
That
we're
would be
doing.
great.
But what we're doing is exactly what if you infuse a formation with technology and then see how they actually use it, and we have the developers that are down there that make software adjustments. We have the drones that are there, and we make adjustments to them. That's what we're doing. So we have a brigade that's going to go over to Europe. We have a brigade now in the 101st. We have a brigade that's out in the Pacific, and we're fixing their network. We're adding electronic warfare, UAS, counter UAS, all of those capabilities. And what this means is we're not going to buy stuff, that say, hey, this is going to be here with us for 20 years. We're going to innovate exactly what you're talking about. I just was down at Stewart, and I know we have partnerships with universities in West Virginia.
Right, and
and
you have
they are
there's a facility out,
innovating.
Clay
and they're-
County.
They're making their own. As an example, they turned what had been a vehicle that was manned. They basically turned it into a breaching vehicle. It was completely automated. So, I mean, these are soldiers that are doing these things. They're able to come up with how we can 3D print parts that cost $20 and, took us 6 months to get to actually 3D printing 16 of them within a minute, and they cost 12 cents each. So these are soldiers that are doing these things. I think that technology has changed that much. We're going to have to adjust with the times.
Well, thank you. It also seems to me, and my time is up, but not only is it a cost saving on the production, but you're not wasting money on things that may not, in theater, actually perform exactly as intended or as thought could be. Thank you all both for being here. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chair Murray, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you both today, for your service and for your leadership, Secretary Wormuth and General George. I look forward to following up with you, if I can, briefly on three things. One that I may have missed the full conversation on, because I have 3 committee hearings at the same time. Really grave concerns about force protection and countering the drone threat. Second, the state partnership program, which I think has shown real benefits in Ukraine and in a dozen other countries I've been to in Africa and Southeast Asia and in Central America. But first, the Global Fragility Act. 5 years ago, President Trump signed into law a bill that Senator Graham and I worked on for years to try and come up with a common approach. This is modeled on Plan Columbia and how we took a combination of DOD, State Department, AID, over a decade to come up with a common approach to dealing with a fragile state that was not yet a failed state. Columbia, 25, 30 years ago, was a disaster. It was a mess. But it was still savable, salvageable. And so a joint strategy effort between DOD, state, and AID successfully moved it back into the column of countries we can work with. We really have struggled to get DOD engagement and implementation. And there was several years ago a decision made by the lead agency, state, to prioritize a few countries, Papua New Guinea, Mozambique, coastal West Africa. I just met with the 4-star responsible for AFRICOM, pressed on the, frankly, deteriorating security situation in the Sahel and coastal West Africa, and would urge you to engage in providing even modest resources to coastal West Africa, recognizing that withdrawal or removal of equipment and forces from Niger is a sensitive and difficult subject to discuss in full here. I would welcome your active engagement. I recognize this often falls to the bottom of the list. But as we saw in Southwest Asia, there are countries that are sort of off our list of priority countries until suddenly they are, at great expense and at great loss of life. So I'd be interested in any brief response, Madam Secretary, or a chance for a follow-up conversation.
Certainly, Senator, happy to do a follow-up as well. Briefly, I would say I think where the Army can be most helpful in that regard is through our Security Force Assistance Brigade, which we have one aligned to each combatant command. So General Langley works with our Security Force Assistance Brigade to try to build interoperability, build up the security forces in those countries. That's, I think, where we could make the best contribution.
I'm intimately familiar. President Ruto of Kenya is here this week for a state visit. He's been a tremendous security partner, Kenya generally, in the counter al-Shabaab work that's very difficult and dangerous in Somalia. But we do not have a comparable platform or plan for coastal West Africa post-Sahel, and I'm very eager to work on that. I'm also concerned about force protection for our forces who are in FOBs in eastern Syria or in Somalia, and just hope that you recognize the urgency of this. I was interested in hearing Senator Capito's questions about soldier-led innovation. We don't have 3 years or 2 years to deploy. I saw the Coyote system in a recent visit to Iraq and to Jordan. I've seen some of the other options. I just don't think we're moving fast enough. What's your sense of what we might be able to do to support faster force protection solutions for very low-tech, easy-to-deliver drones?
So I agree with you, and I was having this conversation with Senator Collins. I do think we need to move faster, and we are doing that. We are basically taking everything that we have available and putting it in the Middle East. And again, it's kind of the user, what Senator Capito was talking about, where you actually have soldiers that are on the systems, the developers and the testers that are all right there. And we have our directed energy that's over. We just directed the high power microwave system that we're doing is going to go over there immediately because I think we have to spin this a whole bunch faster. We did, a lot has changed in that work, and that was why it was on the unfunded priority list to ask to get, because of what's changed in the Middle East since last October. And then this is another area, and I know I've mentioned this, where I think we have to be more flexible in our funding approach so that when we have something that's research is working well, and we know we need to procure more of those systems, and I can give you examples of certain systems that we're doing better, that we wouldn't have to wait, that we could do that. We could come over and notify the committee and then, do a certain wait period and then go ahead and do that. And we would love to work with you on that. But I think we have to turn the wheel a lot faster on counter-UAS.
Given the Houthis, given the proximity, given al-Shabaab, and given where our forces are and how they're deployed, I am as concerned about forces in Somalia and northeastern Kenya as I am about forces in Iraq and Syria, and I hope that elevates. Last, in a sentence, the state partnership program, 30 years old. I think we've got every one of our state National Guards. I think Maine has Montenegro. I think you've got Malaysia or Thailand. And I think you have Gabon, if I'm not mistaken. We've got Trinidad and Tobago. I have visited SPP partnerships in a dozen countries, particularly in the Baltic states and in Ukraine, where they've made an amazing difference. Please continue to support it robustly, and I will continue to advocate for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary General, thanks for being here. Thanks for your service. Appreciate you both very much. Secretary, given the magnitude of the challenges we face, it's critical that the Army National Guard maintain the capabilities to integrate seamlessly into the fight, and I know you support that. We funded 12 MQ-1C Gray Eagle aircraft in fiscal 2023, which supports one Army Guard division. I'm concerned that that's not enough. Will you commit to ensuring parity across the force for the MQ-1C Gray Eagle?
Senator Hoeven, our plan with the Gray Eagles is we have planned to have 12 companies associated with divisions. Mm-hmm. I think we have about half of those on contract right now, and our plan is to have the additional completed by the end of this fiscal year. We still have to work through what are the criteria for stationing those Gray Eagles with our National Guard, and General Hokanson and General Jensen will be putting together those criteria and making sure that they're shared with the adjutants general so that states, have visibility into the process as we think through stationing. But that's our plan right now for Gray Eagle.
Okay, also one of the things that go with that is standing up a schoolhouse in regard to training for the Gray Eagle as well. And I have talked to both members of the Army and the Guard in regard to doing that, because we think we have a very good proposal for you in North Dakota that would be a very cost-effective way to do it. And so we would look forward to discussing that with you as you stand up this mission in the Guard. Okay?
Certainly look forward to discussing that.
Thank you, Secretary. Appreciate it. General, so we're seeing drones transform the battlefield, and certainly Ukraine, other places as well. Army recently canceled plans for several new aviation platforms and seems to be rethinking its requirements on the battlefield. What role do you envision unmanned aircraft, both large and small, playing for Army in the future based on what we're seeing in the current conflicts?
Senator, I was going to tag on to your previous one.
Well, please do. Go ahead.
What we were, because it's related, I think, to what you were talking about. We are going to need unmanned systems in all of our formations. We've been meeting with a large group of TAGs, and the division commanders had a lot of discussions with them about how all of our formations are going to have to transform, and that we're going to need this kind of technology at every echelon in doing that and making those adjustments. So I think not just Gray Eagle, what we're going to need is short range, medium range. It's going to have to be inside of our formation. We did cancel, and I don't know if you're referring to like Shadow and Raven. Those were 25-year-old systems. They were great 15 years ago. But what we can't do is keep something in the formation that we know is not going to be effective on the battlefield. And use Amazon, Home Depot, I mean, all these, there's a lot of great small companies out there that are really moving quickly with unmanned systems. And what we're trying to do is build a modular open system architecture where we can put different systems and sensors on them, and I think that we will be able to adapt to that rate of change if we take that model.
Right on. I mean, we've got to look at, and I know you always do, and I know you are, we've got to look at what's going on in the battlefield right now. And the whole U.S. drones, large and small, are changing the dynamics for all of the services, not just the Air Force or, Navy, but for you, for the Marine Corps, everybody. We do a ton of work in unmanned aviation in Grand Forks, North Dakota. A lot of counter UAS. We have 900 miles of border responsibility. We have Customs and Border Protection co-located with the air base there. We have a technology park there. We have all the major players in this area. But it's not only what we do offensively with these drones, it's what we do to counter them too. And so I would like to invite you to come and see what we're doing, but also because we can't be shooting $1 million missiles to take down a $500 drone and swarms. We've got to get on top of this. We're working very hard on that, and we want to work with you to advance that. So I'm inviting you as well to come see what we're doing, but to work collaboratively on this, not just for the Guard, but for all the services, DoD-wide.
I'm going to try to get up there before it's January and February, since I'm from the Midwest. So
here's the good news: if you come during the nice weather, you get nice weather. If you come during the cold weather, we got the best hockey you've ever seen. We'll take you to a hockey game. But again, thanks to both of you for your service.
All right. Vice Chair Collins, last questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, first let me say I was delighted to hear you talk about 3D printing and the possibilities that it can contribute enormously to our national defense. The University of Maine has one of the largest, if not the largest, 3D printer, and has printed everything from a boat to a home. It's just amazing what they've been able to do. They're also doing a lot of work on ballistic protections for our troops using composites. So it's very exciting, the work that's going on, and I'm glad to know that you see the promise as well. I want to talk about what I think is, or ask you about, what I think is one of the unappreciated consequences of the supplemental, and that is that the replenishment funding helps to modernize the Army. I think that's been lost in this debate, that it gives you better capabilities. So, General, could you please describe how the replenishment funding is helping the Army replace its legacy weapons with more modern capabilities?
A real quick example, Senator, is 113s. They're very capable vehicles, but we are now moving on, and every one that we have provided, we are now buying AMP-Vs. And so we are up, we have a better system. Same thing with Bradleys that we have done and what we're doing to buy a more advanced model. So, and then the other thing is for a lot of that, for the supplemental, 80% or more of it was coming back into our own industrial base and what we're doing right here. So, yeah, we're not buying any old stuff. We're buying new equipment with what we're getting.
And that's a real advantage. And your point is well taken, that the vast majority of the funding in the supplemental actually goes to American industrial companies and creates good jobs. So it's important as far as sustaining our industrial base and strengthening it as well. Secretary, I understand that last month the Department of Homeland Security once again requested emergency support from the military for Southwest border operations. And the Pentagon is estimating that the cost will be at least $490 million, and most of it's going to have to be borne by the Army. First question, has DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, ever reimbursed the Department of Defense for these additional costs that you're bearing to assist DHS on the border?
I believe, Senator, that out of, I think, 20 years of supporting DHS, they have reimbursed us 1 year. I could be wrong on that, but generally, they have not reimbursed us for the support we've offered, which I think goes to Chair Murray's point about the importance of adequately resourcing not just DOD, but other important agencies like DHS.
I think it does as well, but it concerns me because $500 million is not an inconsequential cost, and it means you're going to have to rob some other underfunded program in order to meet what is a very legitimate need. It seems to me that this is a perfect example of something that should have been in the budget request. It's not, because as you point out, this has been going on for many years. Would you support an emergency supplemental to cover those costs?
Certainly, I think they could be considered as part of a supplemental. I do want to emphasize that the Army has always answered the call. We have been in support of our friends in the Custom and Border Patrol. But as you said, it's a significant outlay for us. I think we've already spent $270 million this year. So a supplemental would certainly be helpful for something like this.
Thank you. And finally, let me just reinforce what Senator Coons said about the state partnerships with the National Guard. The one with Maine, with Montenegro, and Maine is applying for another partnership right now, was tremendously successful in getting Montenegro prepared for its NATO responsibilities. And it was just a terrific experience on both sides. So that is a program that I hope we will continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Moran, do you have any additional questions?
I do, thank you very much. A couple of questions in the realm of those who are departing the service in my veterans capacity. Value of veterans bring to the workforce. There is need for transitioning of service members to be appropriately credentialed and translate their skills that they learned in the military into their next career. Secretary, do you think a soldier will be more or less hireable after their transition if they have certifications that translate a breadth of experience to potential employers?
I certainly think helping position our soldiers to have credentials and certificates that help them be as marketable as possible when they transition is valuable.
And is that happening?
Yes, we have, as I'm sure you know, a credentialing assistance program that we've been piloting. It's been wildly successful. I think part of the challenge the chief and I have is putting up some guardrails around that to make sure that we can afford it, again, inside of our flat top line, but we are supporting our soldiers in getting certifications and credentials.
That answer gives me a suggestion that I'll pursue. General George, caisson delays, outline the Army's path forward on what conditions you need to meet to resume operations of horse-drawn caissons at Arlington National Cemetery.
I'm going to mention a couple things, and I'm going to turn it over to my ranger buddy here on the right, because I know she spent a lot of time on this, more than I have. But I think we're looking at, Senator, is conditions-based. I mean, we want to do this. We're obviously, what the support we provide at Arlington National Cemetery is sacred to us and to all of our veterans, and we're trying to stand up this capability. I think we have the right experts that are on board doing that. As well as General Breedenkamp kind of overseeing that, hiring the right people, making sure. And this, the problem we had wasn't created. It took time. And so I think what the approach that we're taking, I think, is a very good one, very sound. We can come over and talk to you about it in detail, but I'll turn it over to my.
Sure. This is something, Senator Moran, we've been working really hard on, and it's surprisingly complex and challenging. But as the chief said, it's going to be several more months before we can offer caisson funerals again, and that is because, among other things, we have to buy 30 more horses to have enough horses to provide this very specialized capability. We have to find the pasture land to support those horses. We have now, I think, gotten on top of making sure that we have the expert veterinary personnel that we need to help us care properly for these horses. And the stables at Joint Base Henderson Hall Myers are going to have to be reconstructed. So we have quite a bit of work to do before we can operate that particular service, which is so important, safely and efficiently. But happy to come talk to you in more detail.
Thank you. It does demonstrate that nothing's simple, but I appreciate your attention. I think it's a really important and meaningful experience for veterans, their families, for military service and their families. Thank you. Final question. Total Army Analysis provided details of new counter-UAS batteries to be employed as division assets. Is this capability on schedule to be delivered to the initial units in FY24 and through 29? And where is the Army accepting risk in the development of this capability?
Thank you, Senator, and the chief may want to add on this. We are on schedule, as we have said throughout this hearing, building up our counter-UAS capability, both the systems and the formations to be able to perform that function is critical. And so we are on schedule right now. I believe that the counter-UAS battery coming to Fort Riley is supposed to arrive in FY29, and we are making it a priority to make sure that we have both the equipment that will be needed for that and also the soldiers who can man that.
General, this has been a theme for you today.
Sure, I'm happy to add something on counter-UAS. I think we didn't get an opportunity to talk about recruiting, and I think that that's the most important thing. Kind of said that in my upfront statement about getting people to come into, and thankfully we're looking a little bit better. We're ahead, slightly ahead of projections, and we're going to continue to focus on that. That's what I think we really need to do, is get the people in and to continue to grow, because this is a capability that we need for 1st Infantry Division and really everywhere. And then it's also, I will tell you, on counter-UAS is something that we're going to have to continue to look at capabilities at echelon and what we need to do, and we're going to have to continuously transform in that area as well.
Chairman, I won't ask a question, but I will conclude. When we did not talk about recruitment, it's one of the most important things on capability of the Army to meet our country's needs. I would offer, if you point me in the right direction, one of my goals to help in recruitment is to further expand the availability of junior ROTC in Kansas. And if you want to point somebody in my direction to kind of help me through that process, I'd be delighted to help find a school or schools that might be interested in. We have great junior ROTC programs at Junction City and at Leavenworth. I'd like to see that elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses today. Senators may submit additional written questions. We ask that you respond to them within a reasonable time. The Defense Subcommittee will next reconvene on Tuesday, June 4th at 10 a.m. for a classified hearing on space-related matters. With that, the subcommittee stands in recess.